What does it mean to truly listen to the people that we're working with? Not just to their vocal instrument, but to their entire person. What are some of those visible outward clues that we might deem to be a technical issue actually telling us? Could it be something psychosomatic? It's the return of Stephen King to the podcast, who is now registered with the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy and the Body Psychotherapy Network. Stephen is here to help us understand his journey from a vocal coach into psychology, to talk about psychology and the voice, how we can include some body psychotherapy in our vocal studios without a psychology degree, and of course to tell us all about his new publication, The Handbook of Vocal Massage, a relational approach, which he co-wrote with Robert Price. Stephen, welcome back. For Christmas, my sister bought me a flip calendar of Shakespearean insults. And I know that's a really weird way to start an interview because it almost sounds like I'm about to just flock loads of insults at you or offend you for the next however long. But that's not true. Although today is actually quite a good one. Dispute not with her, she is lunatic, from Richard III.
Wonderful.
So everyone can throw that out however they like today.
I think my favourite one is I flick my thumb at you, sir. I can't remember what that's from. Maybe Romeo and Juliet, I think. Flick my thumb at you, sir.
You can do that in the supermarket when someone is hovering over the rotisserie chickens and you just want one.
Yeah.
But the point of me saying that was that on the back of today's was a little mindfulness task, which was all about body awareness. And I thought, oh, okay, that feels a little apt for what we're talking about in terms of body psychology, body psychotherapy, and relative or relational approach to therapy. And it was becoming aware of how your body is whilst driving. And the daily extra, which they're called on the back of the calendar, was like, are you gripping the steering wheel? Are your shoulders tight? Is your belly held? And how that then can impact better driving. And not that I want to make the voice seem like a machine. I remember when we were speaking to Jeremy Ryan Mossman, he was saying about how coming away from that analogy is probably more beneficial than thinking of ourselves as machinery rather than living vessels. So firstly, before we dive into the big topics, what pulled you into the world of psychology and what kind of psychosomatic links have you found in singers?
Those are two huge questions. Basically, I've come to a phase deep wisdom, Alexa, right? Which is everything is psychology. And I am willing to change my mind on that when I have some new evidence. But I think there are only three great discoveries in the world, in history, right? Copernicus saying we're not the center of the universe. Darwin saying we're not the center of our own species. We're not it. We're not the king. And Freud saying, you know what? We're not even the center of our own mind. And whatever opinions any of the listeners, viewers have about Freud, I think just park them for a moment, because Freud is everywhere. I mean, everywhere. If you've ever said the phrase daddy issues, that's Freud, man. If you've ever done a Freudian slip, where you say one thing and mean your mother, that's, these concepts, they permeate our way. And psychoanalytic thinking is why we have the Godfather movies. I mean, that's psychoanalysis in practice right there. The Matrix. Are you willing to do what you've always done Or are you now ready to change your entire self? Because if you are, you will never be the same. And that's the paradox of it. And I had an amazing career as a vocal coach, really, and it accelerated at a rate of knots, and got to travel the world doing it. And it was cool. But there was something I just couldn't get away from, which is that when people were coming to me in a one-to-one setting, I couldn't help but feel that in being with their voice, I was sort of missing something about their self. And so I guess how I came to psychotherapy was because there was a point in my life where I realized I didn't know how to be the same anymore. There was something in me that felt compelled to shift. And I had no idea what that was or what that could be. And to be honest, I didn't even know it was possible. And I was speaking at an event, an Industry Minds event in London, after I won the Healthcare Provider of the Year award for Voice Care Centre. And there was a psychotherapist there speaking. I thought, wow, he's got some good shit to say. That's really cool. That's good. That's sort of very eloquent. I don't really think I understand it, but it sounds like something I should probably think about. And I had 24 sessions with him. And my life changed humongously as a result. 24 hours, just a day's worth of hours. I felt like I didn't really know who I was. Because what I realized early on in that process, but I didn't have the words for it then, but I do now, is that the way in which I had gone about my life was my defense of my life. Of course, I was going to be a massively successful vocal coach and employ people and have businesses, and there was no other way my life was going to go, because ultimately that was what I needed to keep myself safe. And it just so happens that the success driver matches up with capitalism really well. So you sort of hide in plain sight. And then people go, wow, aren't you doing well at such a young age? Gosh, I can't believe it. And then that empty void inside me still wouldn't be fulfilled. And so then I try and do the next big thing. And then, I remember when Ginevra and I launched the Vocal Health First Aid, 4,000 people have done that now. 32 different countries, something like that. I mean, it's huge. I think I'm right in saying that there's not been a sort of vocal education like that set up since sort of Estill, really, in that sense, in that breadth of educational reach. And I felt nothing. And that was during my training, that process. And so when you're in training as a psychotherapist and sort of bearing your soul to these strangers in this room, people who are your cohort, there's a process that goes on parallel to the outside world, which is when you're in the space, in the learning space, and you go, yeah, I've done this thing and I feel empty inside. And then everybody looks at you, or everybody looked at me and went, but how can you feel empty inside? That's amazing. And of course, that mirrors what happens outside in the world. Only in there, you can go, well, hold on a second. No, something's wrong here. You're doing that thing that everybody out there does. And then like sometimes you like get into a massive fight about it, and then, you know, the professor has to sort of come and break it up, and it's all sort of quite gnarly. But that's where I began to reconcile something, which is that people with a voice problem are not heard. I mean, at the very core of it, they cannot be heard. And so when their voice is quote unquote working fine, when they've been to the ENT and quote unquote nothing's wrong, and they cannot communicate what they need to communicate, I can't imagine how distressing that must be. I can't imagine how empty you might feel. Just in the same way that, you know, setting up a worldwide education platform, not for profit, you know, for the good of the world, left me empty. And so I guess, how did I come into psychotherapy? Well, through great pain and existential dread. Now I feel differently. Now it's funny to me. Like, well, it's sort of funny, isn't it? I mean, this just you and I here doing this podcast, right? And, you know, before we were coming on talking about crystals and tarot, what? Maybe nonsense, maybe not, maybe heresy, or maybe there's something in it. But I just find that funny now. I mean, hilarious. Because something that I came to realize through my own analysis was that I had inadvertently in these defensible positions, these analytic defenses, we call them, or defenses operating, put myself as sort of the physician, the expert, the untouchable, whoever, sort of next stop God. You know, people come to me and I have all the answers. That was part of my inherent grandiosity, for sure, which has been dismantled over this time, thankfully. But, you know, now I firmly believe that myself and my patients we're both as messed up as one another. And it just so happens we're in a swamp and I have some fragments of the map. And I think most of what we do in voice therapy, in singing, teaching, voice pedagogy, even education, is that the professor, the expert, is sort of next to God. You know, they have the answers. And I think psychotherapy is about the ultimate reconciliation, that you're both people in a swamp. There is no expert. It doesn't exist. You know, sure, there are people who know. I mean, I've read all these books behind me: Psychoanalytic Diagnosis, the Handbook of Body Psychotherapy, EMDR, Pain, Clinical Voice Disorders, the Voice Clinic Handbook. I've got lots of knowledge. Do I really know anything more than you, or the last patient I saw, or, you know, the barista who, you know, made the most excellent double macchiato for me this morning? I think that's false. And I think that's often where most of our problems lie, psychosomatic or otherwise. And so, coming to the voice part of your question, why voice? Why the psychosomatic voice thing? Well, it's sort of what I know, right? And of course, we only know what we know, and we only do what we do, and we only write what we know. And so, you know, I've spent 10 years now with the voice, with anatomy, with vocal massage, with singing, teaching. And so that's what I know. I've seen people in pain with their voice. I've seen people not heard. I've seen people voiceless, utterly voiceless, metaphorically or physiologically. And I find that fascinating. Partly because I think ultimately we're all just trying to be heard. And so training in body psychotherapy, so my original training was in integrative counseling, now body psychotherapy, being able to recognize that the body plays an important role seems obvious to me. Unfortunately, because of our dualistic sort of NHS-y models of things, if you're a psychotherapist, that means, you're providing therapy to the psyche. Except the Greek sort of definition of psyche is soul.
Mm.
And so I sort of wonder what we're doing if we don't include the body in some of that.
I have a friend, I've spoken about her before on the podcast. She's also a singing teacher, really great singing teacher. And she's been really open on her social media platforms about suffering CPTSD and the vocal experiences that have come with that, whether that's around the anniversary of the trauma she experienced. Her name's Claire Delaney. You should go check her out for sure. If we're working with somebody who is showing a particular sign in the voice or the body, or psychologically they may have given us an inkling that there's been some experience in the past where maybe in rooms of authority, or they've been told that in some way that their voice isn't deserving to be heard. How can we as singing teachers play a positive role with them? You mentioned before about being ready and accepting the change. I know there's that famous quote, isn't there? The definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So how can we play a role in that as singing teachers when a lot of us aren't psychotherapists or trained in psychology, but keep within our lane, but acknowledge it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think two things. One is I don't really know. Secondly is I'm going to guess, which is, what would it take for you, the singing teacher, the sort of mythical singing teacher we're talking about here, to really hear them, not to listen to their voice, but to really see if they can hear it. Like, what would that be like? I think back to like the early lessons, the first, I don't know, 1,000 lessons I taught. I wonder about that process. I was reflecting on somebody who I taught at a drama school. She had been kicked out of her family home, was living with her boyfriend, and commuting like 2 hours in each day and 2 hours home. And her voice was tight and inflexible. And nothing, and I was pretty clued up at this point. I mean, nothing I could do could excite enough change for long enough. We'd get somewhere in the session, and then I remember feeling like it was all going to be undone as soon as she got on the train back to wherever she was going. And I sort of wonder who really heard her in that process. Like, I was listening and I was trying to fix her voice. I was an operator, not an interactor. And, I was pretty person-centered back then. But I don't think to the effect of what she needed, which I think probably looked like a very different singing lesson. And probably one that she didn't know she needed either. My guess might, of course, this is all fantasy. I've got no idea whether this is true, right? Which is that what would it take to slow down, to really take our time. You know, imagining her commuting 4 hours a day, rushing to the first train, rushing to the change of platforms, rushing into the drama school in the morning. Just that, what that is in the nervous system. Sort of wondered if we'd just breathed for half an hour. You know, maybe she just needed to take a deep breath. And of course, you know, probably nonsense, right? I mean, maybe she had muscle tension dysphonia. But muscle tension dysphonia doesn't come from nowhere. I get into trouble when I say this, which is, you know, when medicine says something is idiopathic, the idea is there's no reason why. Just showed up. Nothing just shows up. I mean, nothing shows up. Just blah, 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 blah. Oh, there's this thing. That defies what we know about physics and about, even about, you know, you want to look at things a bit more quantumly. I just think that's not how it is. And at the moment, I don't know if you can see, I've got this, the light's really great in here. I've got this little rash on my skin across my forehead. Yeah. 4 months ago, came up to, right. So I'm thinking, what's this about? And I go to the doctor and they say, oh, it's probably rosacea. I say, okay. And they give me an antibiotic cream. Cool. And it's tackling the symptom. I changed my skincare. I've now got a skincare regime. Sort of very mindful, very lovely, but fuck, is it expensive? You know, hyaluronic acid, man. What's that about? Anyway, I'm doing this diligently. And then one morning I was in here in the clinic and doing a face-to-camera piece for Instagram. And I thought, Stephen, you look sore. And my bias immediately went to, you look like the sort of person I wouldn't go and see for health and wellness. You don't look well. So then I deleted the video and I didn't post on Instagram for 2 weeks. And my face cleared up immensely. By the way, I had dropped the antibiotic cream. This is not causative, right? Correlative. Because when I really sort of introspected it, I didn't want to be face to camera. My body was protecting me on some level. And so like muscle tension dysphonia, I don't think is just from nowhere. I think it's a fantastic and troubling self-protection mechanism. And ultimately, that shows us something. And the practice of psychotherapy is about noticing small things. There is no grand thing. All right, sure, you know, we can go through awful experiences and traumas, you know, big things. Revisiting that is revisiting a memory of the thing. That's how memory works. We don't go back to the thing. We go to a memory of the thing.
And you can't always trust the memory, can you?
Can't. And so then we have to reconcile something about how we create our memories. Because our memories are created to keep us safe. Protective mechanism. Well, that feels too good to ignore to me when it comes to the voice. Because it's all personality in the end.
And there's that amazing book, isn't there? The Body Keeps the Score, which shows up some of those things. We've also had a great podcast with one of our level 5 graduates, Dr. Lydia Stone. She's a psychologist and she talks about how she works with adopted children and those sorts of things. And just kind of sharing a story just off the back of yours, I remember my mum sent me some pictures she found of when we were little, me and my sister. And it's so funny. It was such a long child. I was so thin and scrawny, but my shoulders are right up to my ears. And I remember I think I was born with anxiety. And so it was just there. You can see it in pictures of when I'm like 8 years old, that I'm holding so much stuff. And it's only now that I understand, what goes on in my brain, that I understand what that little girl was going through. So I guess we can pick up on the signs. It's not necessarily because somebody's got shoulder tension, so we're going to wiggle it out. It might be that there's an actual psychological hold in the body.
Yeah. And look, Reich talked about this. Wilhelm Reich, who was one of the founders of body psychotherapy, in his book Character Analysis. Good luck if you can get hold of a copy. But he talks about muscular armor. And he says, there are roughly 7 points of armor in the body: the eyes, the mouth and throat, the upper chest, the diaphragm region, the pelvic region, and the knees. And he sort of goes through it and says, if we have things in common parlance, right? They're a bit uptight. They're a bit anal about things. Or I, am sick to my stomach, or there's something coming up for me, or I can't get this taste out of my mouth. I mean, these things which have a physiological root, but they're also a metaphorical thing. Cat got your tongue, there are thousands of them. And his writings on that is that essentially we build this armor, we construct it, our personality constructs it without our knowledge, really. And then we wear it proudly until it gets too heavy. And then, to bring it to an illustrative point, somebody coming to see me at the Voice Care Centre will say, "But Stephen, I've always sung this way. Why now?" And on some level, I feel it's like maybe that's exactly why. You've always sung this way. The armor is as it always was. It's too heavy now. It's too tight. And so now it's time to change that. Of course, the problem is that I'm, a murky man in a swamp. So whereas, 8 years ago, I knew what to do, now I have absolutely no idea. And for some people, that's terrifying. Right. But remember what I said is that I think most of our problems are that we're looking for, God, for want of a better term, a guide, somebody to, I mean that in the small G sense. I hope you understand. I hope that reads, it's there's a great paper on Freud called "Who's Your Daddy?" And it's like this idea of like, psychotherapists love coming back to Freud because he's like the ultimate untouchable father figure, the all-knowing, all-powerful. I've got his 24 volumes of first edition there on the bookshelf. I can sort of look at them and flick through them and, there we go. My analyst is a 5th generation Freudian. So, five analysts ago, it was Freud. I'm directly connected. 6 people connect me to Freud. And so then it's like, wow, cool. Shit. But actually, it's not like that at all. We're looking for that ultimate parental figure or the person to sort of help us navigate this world. And then we create armor by which to try and do that, to protect ourselves from the ills of it all.
I'm just pressing the pause button on the podcast for a very brief moment to invite you to book your free BAST call. If you've been thinking about joining the BAST community through one of our courses, but you just don't know which option is the best for you, then why not book your free Zoom chat with our very own Kimberly George, who has all the answers. Head over to basttraining.com/book-a-call/ and click that big blue button. That's basttraining.com/book-a-call/. Now, where were we?
When it comes to how we apply maybe technical understanding then, or technical exercise, it could be that the student has come into a session and they're very good at playing the role of, I'm calm, everything's fine. The other day I had a student come into me and say, we were watching something the other day at home on TV and there was this therapist on there, and me and my friend looked at each other and both went, that's Alexa, because of her really calm energy. And I thought, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Inside, it's not like that. But I obviously can hide it in some way, or at least, and I'm glad that I can for them because it's about them in the session. But I thought, what if we have one of those students who are just really good at hiding it? And then we go, okay, there seems to be what I would perceive an issue in this register, this articulator, the breathing system, whatever it might be. And we work on that for, say, however long a piece of string is. But they're actually going through something in their life which we aren't aware of. But then it passes over time and you see a shift in that technical area. Well, are we actually working on technique in that area, or was it just because something shifted in their life that made that technical thing change? And how we ever really meant to not necessarily know, but have a full kind of helicopter view of what we're actually doing?
Yeah, I don't know, but let's think together about this, because I think you're onto something here, which is ultimately we don't really matter. I don't think what we do is the important thing, because people will change. But if you know how to get somebody to change, please tell me. Please let me in on that.
No clue, Stephen.
But I'll go to a psychotherapy conference, and there'll be some esteemed doctor so and so, whoever, Gugard, 4 PhDs, lecturing on the thing. I'll sort of go up to them and I'll look in their eyes and I'll say with my eyes, do you know? And they'll look back at me and say, I wonder if this guy knows. And then we stand there both pretending that we know, and then it ends. And I think there's something about that happens in the pedagogy. Me, teacher, you, student, therefore, I know, you don't know. And look, I think technical exercises work. We have enough data, I think, to say that, Chadley Ballantyne's Weird R, for tongue work, for example, right? Cool, great. We can see how that works anatomically, acoustically. So you do it in a session and they change, and then they come back the next session and have entirely forgotten everything. It's not landed in their body. They've got no way in, no way back to it. Well, then meaningful change hasn't occurred. And psychotherapy is about meaningful change, which is why it takes so long. I think my colleagues in the field of healthcare sort of laugh that I might work with somebody 2 or 3 times a week for 18 months. That's a lot of work. But you see, because it's not about what we do, it's about how we are. Because ultimately I'm trying to help them understand that I'm just in the swamp with them. And then they'll come back week on week or day on day on day and say, so Stephen, what do you think I should do about this? And I say, I don't know. What do you think you should do about it? And then they say, well, that's not what I pay your extortionate fee for. And I say, actually, it is. Because there has never been more advice available to us. And yet we have never been sicker. And so I think, maybe part of it, how do I show up? How do I hear this person? Is I don't know. I don't know, but I'm curious about this. I wonder what that is for you. You're coming back in week on week, and I see that we get it in the session, but then it goes. What's that about? Do you know? They might say, oh, I don't know. And then, well, that's the armor.
And isn't that such the place where we need to just check ourselves before it gets into, well, you're obviously just not interested, or you're lazy, or I'm doing something, I'm a crap teacher, or there's so much more to it than any of those labels.
Totally. And look, I think coming back to how Freud influences everything, having a psychoanalytic lens to anything, if you're a plumber, if you're an acupuncturist, a tree surgeon, voice pedagogy, a therapist, the process is this. I'm not really sure that I matter. Therefore, the fact that we're showing up together is the thing. They will or will not change as a result. And that has almost nothing to do with me. And if you can get to that, anybody out there listening to this with imposter syndrome, that goes. Because you stop thinking that you're doing such a great job. And imposter syndrome, I have a suspicion, is actually a great fear of the unknown. But from a place of grandiosity, I can help these people. I know I can. I just don't know enough.
It's a really interesting one, because I just think about, if I'm sure you've had, cards from people or testimonials. And whilst people may say, you gave me some really great tools, the thing they mostly say is about how you made them feel in the room.
Well, yeah, and I guess ultimately this is why I think I come back to the idea that my teacher of psychotherapy said, which was basically, if people have a good hobby and one good friend who just sits there and shuts up and listens and doesn't offer advice, you don't need therapy. Like, too many people are in therapy. They need a good, honest friend who's just there and goes, man, that sounds really shit. I'm sorry. Anyway, another pint. How many of us have that person? I mean, I do now. I didn't when I was living in London, because I was looking for somebody who could contribute to my life in some way, or, they've got to be a somebody, like me, because I'm a somebody in London with my, £3,000 coat. Fucking nonsense.
Where was that from, your coat?
Alexander McQueen.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
But, and I think that sense of it, and, the good hobby, it's like when people come to me now and, there'll be some sort of intake form, right? All right, so tell me about your voice. Well, this. When was the last time you had meaningful time off? Oh, I don't, because I'm always working to afford the rent in London so that I can, pay for my Netflix subscription where I watch, Ricky Gervais abuse trans people and then get really frustrated about it and then, write angry things online and then, try. And then I'm like, well, hold on a second. That has nothing to do with your voice, and yet everything to do with your voice, right? Because what's that like, to not even have time, space, to go and do something for you, just for you, something that's nonsense, that you get nothing material from. And look, I say this with the lens of the hierarchical capitalistic shit that we're in. And when that bit comes into therapy, it's complicated, because people can't just get a hobby. They can't just have a meaningful friend, because they're too damn busy surviving. But look, here's the nuance bit, is I acknowledge that 100%, and I'm sickened and enraged by it. But that's not the job of psychotherapy. That's for politicians and people. Psychotherapy is, I hear you, but what's going on inside? Why can't your voice be heard in this? Do you see what I mean? It's nuanced, isn't it? And then when the 50 minutes are up, fuck the government. Let's go do something about it. But in that 50 minutes, while society and politics influence what's going on in somebody's mind, undoubtedly, it's not the vessel for changing that. Although arguably, if the only work is inner work, maybe all of our politicians, etc., just with a good dose of meaningful psychotherapy might do something.
Maybe you should hand out your business card at 10 Downing Street or something. So can you describe some of the kind of practical things that we might be able to do as us teachers without having kind of any psychology degree that we can implement into our sessions?
Yeah, so something I think which is probably really useful is around how we ground. For me, grounding is not a spiritual practice. It's not a nervous system mechanistic practice. It's sort of somewhere in between. It's the ultimate state changer. It's like we're going from there to here. Because in this half an hour, 90 minutes, whatever, we're here to do this thing. And I want to hear you. I want to hear what you've got to say. However that process unfolds, whether it's one hand on the belly, one hand on the heart, and we just breathe together for 30 seconds. Whether it's, something more movement or somatic based, like imagine this. You've got a student who really grinds your gears, right? Let's imagine this. Because you or I have never had a student like that, have we? No. And the first thing that you do, instead of getting them in and going, welcome, I'm so pleased to see you, and looking at the clock every 1 minute, is that you, if this is all appropriate and consensual, right, stand next to them so that the left side of your body is in contact with the right side of theirs. And you do a trust game. And you say, just let's support each other's weight. And we'll see if we can take the middle seat away. Now imagine what that might do as a grounding exercise for you and for them. Do we trust each other in this space? Can we connect to each other in this space? Do you grind my gears because of you or because of me in this space? Because ultimately, you're the teacher who's living your life by that clock. And man, I wish I could go back in time and get some of those hours back. Because that's part of being heard, isn't it? Is somebody being a certain way, which evokes something in you And then you might not be able to really arrive for them. And they might be asking you, not consciously, but they might be asking you to really hear them because they believe you're the only person who might. And you're sitting there watching the clock, which, by the way, is probably what happens to them everywhere else in their life too. And so can you move to a grounded place of compassion, person-centeredness, unconditional positive regard? You really do that and just be with that person and be like, wow, my gears are ground. I just wonder about that. So yeah, so something grounding, something breathing, something somatic, but again, not as like a, this is going to do some magical Gugar thing or some nervous system doodah, whatever. It's just, can you and I be in this space to do this piece of work together?
Yeah, I've seen singers come in. I've done my warm up. Let's get straight to song. And actually, I think let's just take that a little bit of time to just get into a new setup. Like, great that you've done a warm up, but you've just come from this class or you've just come from work. There's a whole load of stuff that we might just want to just acknowledge or let go of.
For sure. And look, what I have seen is that patterns in here play out as patterns out there. So coming in, you know, right, I've done my warm up. Let's do the thing. And they might be the exact person in their life who sort of has always done the thing before the thing. And then might wonder why they come to a voice problem, let's say later on in life. So yeah, but I always warm up. And it's like, cool, how? And they say, oh, well, I do this 2-hour YouTube video that I found, and I do it twice a day, and da. And then it's like, well, how did this go unchecked for so long? Because nobody heard them. Nobody went, show me your warm-up. Let's really look at that. I'd love to really know what you're doing, because I want to be part of this. Just as a thought.
A huge congratulations really is in order, because you have written or co-written another book, this time with Robert Price, called The Handbook of Vocal Massage, a Relational Approach. So congratulations on that. How does it feel to have another one under the belt?
Well, no longer empty inside, you'll be pleased to know.
I'm very pleased to know.
When it arrived, it's quite a beautiful thing. When it arrived, and you can't quite get a sense of the feel of it, but it's like matte. It's like so beautiful. And I felt really proud of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's amazing.
I'm really meaningfully proud of it. And the concepts in it are, you know, it's 200 pages. It's taken 5 years to write. We did a first draft, and Robert and I've read it, and we got to the end. I'll just write down. So we got to the end, and I was like, I feel like there's something missing. He was like, yeah. And I said, Robert, how do you feel about us doing a sort of, and here's where we think this might be going? And he went, yeah, cool. Well, why don't you do something about that? And so the last chapter is called Establishing Relational Vocal Massage as a Method Within Body Psychotherapy. Because what I came to realize is that what I had been doing all along is sort of psychotherapy with the body. The dispositional ontology, the person-centered work, the biopsychosocial practice, the consent matrix that I co-authored with Lydia Flock, you know, the equation framework. This is all traditionally body psychotherapy. I just didn't know it, because until I came to formally study it, I was like, oh, I know this. Yes, I've got an idea of this. So there was something really, really beautiful about sort of writing it and then going, I think I know where this is going now. So thank you for the congratulations. It means a lot. And yes, it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine it was. And of course, Stuart Harris, who did your illustrations for previous books, is the illustrator on this one as well. And you showed us some lovely pictures.
Yes, there's some beautiful, I won't be able to find them now, flick through quickly. This view of the tongue, I don't know if you can see that. It's from the back out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And like getting a view of the tongue from the soft palate, there just isn't one.
There is now.
There is now. And so Stuart's done some amazing, very anatomically detailed, accurate work, and just his beautiful style. And so it's available through New Voice Publishing. I think you've got the link.
Got the link. We'll pop that in the show notes, so people can get their copies. And we had Robert Price on the podcast about 8 months ago, and he was telling us about self-massage, guiding us through some self-massage exercises. And he also told us about his first experience of massage. I think he said it was around like an aromatherapy experience, but when he had that, he had lots of memory recall of positive times that he'd been touched in his life. So what was your first experience of massage?
My first experience of massage was not good. And perhaps this is the ultimate defense, right? I need to dedicate my life to doing this so that nobody goes through what I went through. I left my first vocal massage damaged.
Oh, wow.
And it took years for my voice to recover. I mean, fully recover. If I was touched, and in fact, Robert was the person who I worked that out with so he came and did the training, and I thought his hands were incredibly skillful and his approach, really beautiful. And so when I invited him to work at the Voice Care Centre, I said, look, but as a sort of interview, do you think you could help me with this thing on the right-hand side of my cricothyroid region? And he said, yeah. So I went along, and, the process of being then worked on. So the same hold, the same pressure, and, another man doing it to me. Yet now there was a whole cycle of trust. I consented to it. It felt healing and not hurtful. And so I think, in terms of then what Zoe McParlin calls priors, getting to a sense of, we have a prior sense of ourselves, a somatic map, an idea of how we are in the world, in 3D space, right? And Robert and I together were able to update a prior in me, a harmful prior. And so I think often what we're doing with touch is seeking to update harmful priors, but also excite meaningful, beautiful priors. I mean, being touched in a meaningful way, a consensual, meaningful way, is sometimes breathtaking and beautiful. And I don't think that bit is talked about enough.
And do you think on that, because obviously consent has to be a big part of it, do you think that we're scared as teachers now to ask or even involve a bit of that in our work?
Yeah, I've written about this quite extensively, and I'm writing a new paper called, well, I won't tell you what it's called, but I'm writing a new paper on it, which basically is hopefully cementing the idea of the contract in voice pedagogy in a feminist sort of phenomenological framework. which is tricky because those two things almost cancel each other out anyway. We'll try. But the thing about your question is that, yes, I think we're afraid. I'm not afraid. I think people are afraid of the litigious aspect of touch. And gaining consent in a meaningful way is not, can I put my hand on you? It's, how do we navigate this if you begin to feel unsafe? And ultimately, if that happens, is there really the permission to say no? Because if there isn't, then meaningful consent hasn't been garnered. And so, particularly in the States, it's illegal to touch your students. If you don't have a license to touch, it's illegal. In the UK, that's not the case. Anybody can anybody can set themselves up as a beauty esthetician. I could do your Botox.
I need it. I'll take it, Stephen, if you're offering it. Just stick a needle anywhere.
Yeah. But the thing is I think about it and I go, well, I know craniofacial anatomy. I could probably do, and then it's like, how mad is that? That I could inject literal poison into your face and that'd be totally legal. And so it's a little bit the Wild West in terms of that here in the UK. And therefore, I think we're in a place of like, it's useful, but also potentially dangerous. And so I think including touch has to have a meaningful consent with it. And I think if touch is included, there has to be a rationale, what we would call a clinical rationale. Somebody coming to me with really, really acute flare-up of acid reflux, I'm going to be touching their stomach, if that's permissible. Am I going to be touching the sole of their foot? I don't have a clinical rationale for that. So, yes, I think people are afraid, and I think that's a shame, because touch, if navigated well consensually, and that's the key bit, right, is a learning opportunity, a learning vessel, unlike any other, because it bypasses cognition. There's no, oh, how am I thinking about it? It's like, wow, straight to feeling.
Part of your book title is the relational approach to the vocal massage. How do we have relational approach in vocal pedagogy then and vocal tuition? Is it the same sort of rationale?
Well, I think look, at the heart of the relational approach is you and I in relation. And I think there are a couple of things that have to be there for that to happen. Like, there has to be a frame. You and I agreed to meet at 2:30 on Thursday, the 10th of April on your Zoom. So we can be in relation because of that. But we might all know that person who goes, I'll call you. Or when? I might be doing something else. I might not be able to pick up. I don't know how long I'll have. Well, right there, you can't be in as deep a relation as you and I can be here. It's not set up for it. And so, just a simple thing is, how many singing teachers overrun their lesson?
Guilty. Yes.
But does that leave you fully in relation? Because you've broken the contract. We'll meet for 60 minutes here to here. And at the 65th minute, they're walking out. And so what does that mean then? Does that mean you've undervalued your time? You've priced it wrong? Does it mean that they are your favorite student and so you'll give them more? Does that then impact the next person? And how does that person feel about that person being run over, but you never run over with them? Because they're the person who grinds your gears. And so then just in that very simple example, which is something I've done in the past, you've done, everybody will have done, it doesn't leave us in relation. And that can be difficult in therapy, right? Imagine this, the 49th out of the 50 minutes, and they disclose something awful. I mean, something that maybe you can't even imagine how awful some of the things I've heard. And it gets to 50 minutes and I say, we're at time. Let's pick this up on Tuesday.
Yeah, well, that's really tough.
Imagine how much you and I would need to be in relation for that to be okay. But we only get there by me having held that boundary, held that boundary, held that boundary. So then when I say it's 50 minutes, then they know I don't hate them. I don't think it's a disgusting thing that's happened or so. You know, the mind wanders. I'm just here to be the therapist from minute 1 to minute 50.
And do you think that you can reinstate those boundaries once they've been kind of flawed?
For sure. I mean, you know, sometimes it can be a bit like, hey, look, you know, I've got to apologize because I've been running over and you know what? I need to hold myself accountable to this time. So, you know, where I've run over in the past, I'm not going to do that anymore. Because actually, do you know what? I don't think it helps anybody. There's an amazing case study of somebody in the psychoanalytic literature where it's a patient who wrote with their analyst saying that she, for 5 years, tried to make her analyst go over the 50 minutes and never did. And so her conclusion was, see, I proved it. Nobody really cares about me. And of course, the analyst said, well, if that's what you took from it, we haven't had meaningful psychotherapy. Because it's not that I don't care. It's that this is the time in which you and I do this thing. And you see, that's different, right? And so, yeah, so there are lots of layers to relationality, to the relational approach. And we go through them in the book. But basically, if you can't keep time, you're failing at the first hurdle.
Damn. I need to pick myself back up and get back on the horse. Can you tell us what else we might find in the book?
Yeah, so what else might you find in the book? Okay, well, there's lots of anatomy. I love anatomy. I've studied anatomy. I've been in the dissection lab. I've written about anatomy. I've lectured on it. I love it. I now know there's more to the human being than the muscles. However, anatomy influences what we know about red flags, and that's important to keep people safe. So there's lots of anatomy. There's lots of really cool moves. Basically, we've written out the moves as though they're a story.
Oh man, that sounds like something up my street.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I'm really chuffed with how all of that turned out. And then the philosophy of the work. I mean, you know, the dispositional, time, relational, person-centered, biopsychosocial. We go through how to do the consultation.
Oh, fab, yeah.
I mean, you know, how do you receive somebody's history? You know, and we've written about, I mean, there's a beautiful section in the book, which is it you and I discovering something like an archaeological dig, or are we creating something? Are we finding the ceramic, or are we sort of making the pot on the turntable? And, you know, there's invitations of open philosophical questioning throughout this. You know, hopefully attending to my now stance of swampy mud person.
I love that. I think at the next Halloween party, you need to go as Shrek or something. Be like, this is me going as the swampy person.
Yeah, I've finally made it.
And does anybody who hasn't done maybe your massage courses or isn't a licensed massage therapist, can they still follow the steps in the book and and guide somebody else through it themselves rather than being hands-on?
Yeah. So look, if you're going to touch somebody else, you need to be trained to do so and insured, I think. And if you're interested in what vocal massage is and has to offer, then this book is the book. I mean, it's the book that I wish I had had. I think that's why we write books, is because we write the book that we wish we could have read. The hand positions, the story, the practice within it, it's very accessible. And we've made it so that, you know, anybody can pick the book up and really understand it. Because I'm not about that hierarchical medical jargon life.
It just alienates people, doesn't it?
Yeah, why do I need another degree to be able to understand it? You know, just tell me it.
And what sort of pocket money do we need to save for a copy?
Well, it is £74, 74 great British pounds. The process of pricing it is really tough because, like, I look at the Voice Clinic Handbook, it's like 120 quid now. And do I think it's as good as the Voice Clinic Handbook? I think it probably occupies a similar position. Does it cost a lot of money now to print and bind a beautiful book like this that's fully colored? Yes. You know, and so 74 great British pounds is what you'll pay for it.
Just before I close up that, Stephen, are you happy with how it's gone? Is there anything I haven't asked that you think I've ignored that was important to you to get over today?
You know, I think you're an excellent host of this podcast.
Oh, thanks, Stephen.
And I feel very, I feel like I can really speak.
Oh, good.
So that is your gift, I think.
Well, I'm really glad because I was listening to everything you were saying. Remind us, Stephen, where can we follow your work and get in touch with you for any questions we may have, or maybe even to inquire about the online vocal massage course I know you have, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so you can follow me at Voice Care Centre on Instagram and then voicecarecentre.co.uk online. And I mean, if you type in Stephen King voice, I'll come up. So you can find me.
Brilliant. Oh, as always, Stephen, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming back on. And I didn't insult you after all, did I?
You didn't. Damn.
You grubby bastard. There you go. I won't keep that in, do I?
You must. You
Do you think I
must.
should?